grandfather immigrated in 1900 to the United States and arrived through British Columbia. And originally he worked in the salmon fisheries in British Columbia, and then came down to the United States where he worked on a railroad and then later in the lumber yards here at Westport, Oregon, which is where my father was born. And the two people that are portrayed up there is actually his uncle and his, let's see, that would be his father's sister, actually, who married into that family. This is a picture on the left of the wedding of my grandfather. After 12 years in the United States, he earned enough money to go back to Japan, get married to a bride who was through a family arranged marriage, and they had a traditional Japanese wedding. They stayed there for about 2 years, and in 1914 came back to Westport, Oregon to raise their family, and that's my dad sitting in the lap of my grandfather. So he farmed after working at Westport Lumber Yards in Tualatin, Oregon. He saved enough money to buy a farm, but he ended up having asthma, and so decided he had to leave the farm and bought a hotel in Portland, Oregon. And one of the hotels that he bought is the Villa House, which happens to be kind of that reddish-looking building with the portico sticking out into the street. This is the front of the Villa House, and he took over the property right next to it and made it into a grocery store. And he called it Newton's Grocery Store for my dad, whose name was Newton Wesley at the time. And this is a picture of the interior of the grocery store with my grandfather on the far right. And one of the boarders, Vito Roncalli, who was an Italian immigrant who helped work in the grocery store. And on my mom's side, this is my grandfather, who looks very dapper. He was 31 at the time, obviously westernized already in those days. And he immigrated, he decided to leave the Buddhist priesthood because he was really interested in music. And so he wanted to come to the United States to pursue that goal. It's actually a month after that he left this temple, which is on the left, in Nagoya, and came to the United States, and that's his passport there in 1905. He settled in Seattle and met my grandmother in the United States, and she was from a town nearby Nagoya, and she came in 1907, but she was 18 years old while my grandfather was 31 at that time. And they met at a Methodist church where he was directing the choir and she played the piano. And so they got married and had 5 children. There's a picture of them with 3 of the children. My mom is sitting in my grandma's lap at that time in that portrait. So everybody in that family happened to be musical. They all had to play piano because my grandmother taught them that, and I had to play piano when I was young too. My grandfather worked here at Frederick and Nelson in Seattle. He was a salesman in the furniture department, and he also directed the choir on all of the special events. So I assume his English was really very good. And this is their family portrait, my mom being sort of in the middle there at the top. And my dad is in the picture below with his basketball team, and he's the casual one leaning over, and everybody else is standing up straight. But Mom and Dad met at church socials, and when he was playing basketball, and the teams would travel between Portland and Seattle, and they fell in love, and they got married in Portland after 3 years of courting. And they lived at the Villa House, which is where I was born, because they wanted to save money. And at that time, my dad was going to optometry school, and he graduated. The school is shown in the top right picture. And then he not only went to that school, the president of the school wanted to retire and thought that he was a capable student and somebody that could carry the name of the school forward, and he actually gave the school to him to run. And my dad said, well, I can't really accept it for free. And he got two other students, friends of his, and they got $5,000 together and bought the school from the president, Harry Lee Fording. At that time, he also started his own practice in Portland after graduating, and he was also president of the Portland Japanese American Citizen League, and he's shown in the picture on the bottom on the far left. Well, this happened, which of course is Pearl Harbor, and that changed life for all of us at that time. These portray the sentiments that were prevalent at the time. The caption on that picture is says that I can't read it actually. It says something about this is what's going to happen to all the white women, being by the yellow peril. And at that time, there were also all of these various forms of the Jap hunting license. And they actually had certificates, they had these little medals, they had things that people could display. And after 9/11, I was struck by the fact that the same kind of sentiment, the Muslim hunting licenses, started appearing, and they're still around. So things don't change after all of this time. I wanted to discuss a little bit about when the FBI came to visit our family right after Pearl Harbor, and a lot of Japanese Americans' family were visited by the FBI. My dad had been friends with a printer who was like 2 doors down from his eye clinic, and they would get together and talk almost every week. His daughter, who was about 12 years old at that time, was having visual problems, so he brought her into my dad for a vision exam. My dad checked her out, found that she needed glasses, dispensed the glasses, and solved her problems. And he was very grateful. My dad didn't charge him anything because they'd been developing this close relationship over all this period of time. Well, just after Pearl Harbor, when the FBI came, my dad wasn't home, but his father was home. And they hadn't hidden any of all the Japanese things that they had, which is what Japanese Americans did at that time, because they didn't want to show loyalty to the emperor or have any connection to Japan, because you could get arrested and sent away. Well, the captain of the team, once he found out who he was and that the name was Wesley, he said to his team, "Leave them alone, there's nothing here." And they left. Well, my dad found out after he left from my grandfather that the captain of the team was this Mr. Grossenbacher, who he had befriended, and so it paid off for him. But the thing is, there were so many other families where the father of the family was taken away by the FBI, and in some cases they never saw their father again. So what was the justification for these searches and arrests? Well, in 1940, the Alien Registration Act gathered information on all resident aliens over 14. It's this information that was used against the suspects when FDR declared that all Japanese nationals were enemy aliens. So FDR also issued another proclamation, 2525, for the immediate arrest of suspected dangerous enemy aliens. The press, of course, created a lot of hysteria and prejudice, citing these arrests as evidence of the danger that the Japanese Americans were to the society. California Attorney General Earl Warren, at the time, who later became, of course, a California governor and a Supreme Court justice, presented a map to Congress suggesting that Japanese Americans were a threat because their lands were near strategic defense installations like airports, railroads, and harbors. That was an unsubstantiated claim. And of course, the reason the Japanese Americans were in those areas because that was the worst land and the cheapest to buy at the time. So they would farm the worst areas that nobody else wanted. It wasn't that they were there for being a threat.